The manager cornered her in the empty kitchen, his intentions clear. She had nowhere to run. Then a hand gripped his wrist from behind. The quiet dishwasher, who never spoke to anyone. What she didn't know, he wasn't a dishwasher at all. He was a mafia boss investigating the restaurant. And now, he wasn't leaving without her. The fluorescent lights in Rossi's kitchen hummed like dying bees. Ivy Martinez wiped down the last table, her sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. Midnight had come and gone, and the restaurant felt different when empty, bigger somehow, like a theater after the audience leaves. "Hey, Ivy," Mark's voice cut through the silence. "You almost done back there?" "Just finishing up," she called out, spraying cleaner on the counter. Her manager stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, arms crossed, that smile on his face. The one that made her stomach turn. Mark Patterson was 38, divorced twice, and had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He'd been managing Rossi's for 3 years, and in the 6 months Ivy had worked there, he'd gone from friendly to persistent to something that felt like a warning. Good. He stepped into the kitchen. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about your schedule next week." Ivy kept her eyes on the counter, scrubbing at a stain that had probably been there since the Clinton administration. "You can just text me the schedule like always." "Yeah, but I thought maybe we could discuss it over drinks. Somewhere quieter.
More
private." There it was. The 4th time this month. "I'm good, Mark. Thanks, though." She moved toward the dish station, trying to put distance between them. He followed. "Come on, Ivy. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to be friendly. And I'm just trying to finish closing so I can go home." She grabbed a stack of clean plates, but Mark stepped into the narrow hallway that led to the walk-in freezer. "The only way out." He said, his voice dropping lower, "I've been real flexible with your shift requests. Real understanding when you needed time off for your mom's appointments." Ivy's hands tightened around the plates. "I appreciate that. So maybe you could appreciate me back." He moved closer. The hallway was barely 3 feet wide, industrial shelving on both sides loaded with supplies. "1 drink. That's all I'm asking." "Mark, I need to get past you. Just think about it." His hand reached out, fingers grazing her wrist. "I said no." Ivy pulled back, but there was nowhere to go. Her spine hit the metal shelving, rattling boxes of pasta. Mark's expression changed. The friendly mask slipped, revealing something uglier underneath. "You know what your problem is, Ivy? You think you're better than." He stopped mid-sentence. Someone was standing behind him. Ivy hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard the kitchen door open. But there he was, Julian, the new dishwasher, who'd started 2 weeks ago. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair and darker eyes that currently held no expression whatsoever. "Kitchen's closed," Mark said, not turning around. "Whatever you forgot, get it tomorrow." Julian didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, perfectly still, with one hand resting loosely at his side. Something about that stillness made Mark's voice falter. "I said." Mark turned around, finally meeting Julian's eyes. Whatever he saw there made him take a step back. Julian moved forward, not rushed, not aggressive, just a smooth, deliberate step that somehow filled the entire hallway. His hand came up and wrapped around Mark's wrist with the casual precision of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. She said no. Julian's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried weight like a closed fist. Mark tried to pull away. Julian's grip didn't budge. "Let go of me." Mark's face reddened. "You're fired. You hear me? You're. Leave." 1 word. That's all it took. Julian released Mark's wrist and stepped aside, creating a path toward the exit. His eyes never left Mark's face, and in them, Ivy saw something that made her breath catch. Not anger.
Not even dislike.
Just absolute, unwavering certainty. Mark looked at Ivy, then back at Julian. Whatever he saw made the decision for him. He straightened his shirt, tried to reassemble his authority like puzzle pieces, and walked out. His footsteps echoed through the empty dining room, followed by the slam of the front door. Silence filled the kitchen. Ivy realized she was still holding the stack of plates. Her hands were shaking. She set them down carefully before they could slip. "You okay?" Julian asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed, a short, slightly hysterical sound.
Yeah. No.
"I don't know," she looked up at him. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "You don't have to thank me. I do, though. You might have just lost your job because of me." Julian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'll be fine." He turned to leave, and Ivy suddenly didn't want to be alone in the empty restaurant.
Wait.
"How did you even know I was still here?" "I thought everyone left." "I was in the back. Heard voices." "The supply room? What were you doing back there?" "Inventory," he said it simply, but something flickered in his expression. "I like to be thorough." Ivy studied him. Julian had been working at Rossi's for 2 weeks, and in that time, she'd learned almost nothing about him. He showed up on time, did his work without complaint, and disappeared during breaks. Never ate with the other staff. Never participated in the gossip or the complaints about customers. Just existed at the edges of everything. "I'm Ivy," she said, even though he obviously knew that. "Ivy Martinez." "Julian." "Just Julian?" "Just Julian." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You should go home. It's late."
Yeah.
"I just need to finish." "It's finished. Go home, Ivy." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt protective, which was strange coming from someone she barely knew. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Thank you. Again." Julian nodded once and left through the back door. Ivy stood in the empty kitchen, heart still hammering, trying to process what had just happened. She grabbed her jacket from her locker and headed out, but not before noticing something odd. The supply room door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, she could see papers spread across the floor. Not inventory sheets. Financial documents. Employee records. Something with the restaurant owner's letterhead. Ivy closed the door quickly and left. She told herself it was none of her business. She told herself Julian had probably just been curious. But as she walked to her car under the burnt orange glow of parking lot lights, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just been saved by someone far more dangerous than the person she'd been saved from. The staff room at Rossi's kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener. Ivy sat on the worn couch, scrolling through her phone while the morning shift trickled in. She'd barely slept, replaying last night over and over in her mind. "Did you hear?" Sarah, one of the other waitresses, dropped her bag on the table with a thud. "Mark called in sick today." Ivy looked up. "He did." First time in 3 years, Sarah poured herself coffee, her eyes bright with gossip. "Danny said he sounded weird on the phone, like scared or something. Maybe he's actually sick," Ivy said, though her stomach twisted. "Or maybe," Tommy the line cook leaned against the doorframe, "he finally pissed off the wrong person." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah asked. Tommy lowered his voice. "I came in early today to prep. Saw the new dishwasher, Julian, leaving the owner's office. So." Sarah shrugged. "So, Mr. Rossi wasn't even here yet. And the door was locked when I tried it 10 minutes earlier." Tommy's eyebrows raised. "How'd he get in?" Ivy's chest tightened. She thought about those papers in the supply room. The financial documents. "Maybe Mr. Rossi gave him a key," she offered weakly. "Why would he give a dishwasher keys to his office?" Tommy pulled out his phone. "And another thing, last night I was having a smoke out back around 11:30. Saw Julian talking to 2 guys by the dumpsters. Serious-looking dudes in suits. At midnight. Behind a restaurant. Maybe they were lost," Sarah said, but her tone had changed. Uncertain now. "In the alley? Both wearing $1,000 suits." Tommy shook his head. "I'm telling you, something's off about that guy." "He seems nice enough," Ivy said, surprising herself by defending him. "Quiet.
Keeps to himself."
That's what makes him scary." Tommy grabbed a Red Bull from the fridge. "You know what I mean?" Like most dishwashers, they complain, they talk, they're normal. This guy? He's like a ghost. Shows up, does his work, disappears. Never smiles. Never jokes.
Just
Watches. You're being paranoid, Sarah said, but she glanced toward the kitchen like she was checking if Julian was there. Am I? Carlos said Julian knew how to fix the industrial steamer when it broke yesterday. Just walked over and fixed it in 2 minutes. What dishwasher knows how to do that? Someone who's worked in restaurants before?
Ivy suggested.
Yeah, maybe Tommy didn't sound convinced. Or someone who knows how to do a lot of things. Professional things. The conversation was cut short when Julian himself walked into the staff room. The energy shifted immediately. Tommy went quiet. Sarah suddenly became very interested in her coffee. Julian moved to his locker, opened it with a key, and pulled out his apron. He didn't acknowledge anyone, didn't seem to notice or care about the sudden silence. Ivy stood up, her heart beating faster than it should. Hey, Julian. He turned, his dark eyes finding hers. Something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe warmth. Ivy, I just wanted to say, thanks again. For last night. No need. He tied his apron with practiced efficiency. Mark's not here today. I heard. Julian's expression remained neutral, but Ivy caught something in his voice. Satisfaction, maybe. Or confirmation of something he'd already known. Did you
talk to him?
After? No, he closed his locker. But I don't think he'll bother you again. Sarah's eyes widened. Tommy took a step back toward the door. How can you be sure? Ivy asked. Julian looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost kind. Because no one messes with my staff. The words hung in the air. My staff. Not our staff. Not the staff.
My.
You've only been here 2 weeks, Tommy said from the doorway, trying to sound casual and failing. Julian turned to him slowly. That's right. So, why do you talk like you own the place? I don't own it. Julian's mouth curved slightly. Yet, he walked out of the staff room, leaving the 3 of them staring after him. What the hell did that mean? Sarah whispered. Tommy shook his head. I'm telling you, that guy's not a dishwasher. Ivy wanted to argue, wanted to defend Julian again, but she couldn't. Because Tommy was right. Julian moved wrong for a dishwasher.
Talked wrong.
Had an authority that didn't match his position. Last night, when he'd grabbed Mark's wrist, it hadn't been the clumsy intervention of a good Samaritan. It had been precise. Controlled. Practiced. Like someone who'd done much worse things to much worse people. The lunch rush started, and Ivy found herself watching Julian throughout her shift. He worked the dish station with mechanical efficiency, never rushed, never flustered. But several times she caught him watching too, not her but the restaurant. The way Mr. Rossi moved through the kitchen. The suppliers who came through the back door. The manager's office with its closed blinds. During her break, Ivy stepped into the alley for air. She'd been out there maybe 30 seconds when Julian appeared beside her, silent as smoke. You should be careful, he said. Of what? Of working here. He pulled out a cigarette, offered her one. She shook her head. This place isn't what it seems. What do you mean? Julian lit his cigarette, exhaled slowly. Just be careful, Ivy. And if Mark comes back, if he tries anything again, you come find me. Understand? Why are you really here, Julian? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for just a second, the mask dropped. She saw exhaustion underneath. And something else. Something like regret. To make things right, he said finally, one way or another. 3 days passed, and Mark returned to work. Ivy saw him arrive through the kitchen window, parking his Honda Civic in the back lot like always. But something was different. He sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, staring at the restaurant like it was a building he'd never seen before. When he finally came inside, he looked smaller somehow. His shoulders curved inward, his usual swagger replaced by something cautious. Afraid. Morning, Sarah chirped as Mark passed through the kitchen. He nodded but didn't respond. Didn't make his usual jokes or complain about traffic or comment on what everyone was wearing. Just walked straight to his office and closed the door. Told you he sounded weird, Sarah whispered to Ivy. Look at him. Ivy watched through the office window. Mark sat at his desk, ran his hands through his hair, then reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over it, then pulled back, like he wanted to call someone but didn't dare. Julian appeared beside the dish station, and Mark's head snapped up. Their eyes met through the glass. Mark looked away first,
Quickly.
like he'd just touched something hot. Did you see that? Tommy nudged Ivy's shoulder. Mark's terrified of him. Maybe he's just embarrassed, Ivy said. About what happened. That's not embarrassment. That's fear. Tommy loaded dirty plates into the industrial washer. Real fear. Throughout the morning shift, Ivy noticed Mark's behavior growing stranger. He avoided the dish station entirely, taking the long way around the kitchen even when it made no sense. When he needed to check inventory in the back, he sent Carlos instead. And whenever Julian moved, Mark tracked him with his eyes, the way someone might watch a dog they didn't trust.
But Julian?
Julian acted like Mark didn't exist. He worked steadily, efficiently, his hands moving through dishes with mechanical precision. Except Ivy noticed something new. Between loads, Julian would disappear for 5 or 10 minutes. Not to smoke. Not for breaks. She followed him once, curious and slightly concerned. Julian went to different parts of the restaurant, the dry storage, the walk-in freezer, even the dining room when it was empty between rushes. But he wasn't wandering. He was observing, studying, making mental notes of something Ivy couldn't identify. In the dry storage room, she watched him examine the invoices pinned to the corkboard. Not casually.
Carefully.
He pulled out his phone and photographed several of them. Looking for something? Ivy asked from the doorway. Julian didn't startle. He turned slowly, slipped his phone into his pocket, and gave her that almost smile. Just checking supplies. Since when do dishwashers check supplies? Since we keep running out of dish soap, he moved past her, close enough that she caught his scent, something clean and expensive that definitely didn't come from a dishwasher salary. Julian, what's really going on? He stopped, his back to her. What do you mean? You're not really a dishwasher, are you? I wash dishes. That makes me a dishwasher. That's not an answer. Julian turned around, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, like he was deciding something. Has Mark bothered you again?
No.
He won't even look at me. Good. What did you do to him? Nothing. Julian. I didn't touch him, Ivy. I didn't threaten him. I didn't have to. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Some people understand power without needing it explained. Mark's one of them. And you have power? I have what I need. It wasn't a real answer, but something in his tone told Ivy not to push. Not yet. That afternoon, things got weirder. A supplier arrived with the weekly meat delivery, Tony, a guy who'd been coming to Rossi's for years. But when he rolled his dolly through the back door, he froze. His eyes landed on Julian at the dish station, and his face went pale. Jesus Christ, Tony whispered, loud enough for Ivy to hear. What are you doing here? Julian looked up slowly. Recognition flickered across his face. Tony. Tony caught himself, glanced around the kitchen nervously. Does anyone know you're here? The people who need to know. Tony set down the dolly with shaking hands. I'll get the rest from the truck. He practically ran outside. Friend of yours? Ivy asked Julian. Former business associate. What kind of business? Julian didn't answer. He returned to the dishes, but Ivy saw his jaw tighten. Saw the way his shoulders tensed like he was preparing for something. 10 minutes later, Mr. Rossi himself came out of his office, something he rarely did during lunch rush. He was a short, round man in his 60s, always sweating, always stressed. But today he looked panicked. He walked straight to Mark's office and closed the door. Through the glass, Ivy watched them argue. Mr. Rossi's face red, his hands gesturing wildly. Mark shaking his head, pointing toward the kitchen. Toward Julian. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. When Mr. Rossi emerged, he looked at Julian with an expression Ivy couldn't quite read. Fear mixed with something else. Resignation, maybe. Mr. Rossi left through the back door without a word to anyone. What was that about? Sarah asked, appearing beside Ivy with a tray of dirty glasses. I don't know.
But she was starting to suspect.
The pieces were there, scattered like breadcrumbs. Julian's authority. Mark's fear. Tony's recognition. Mr. Rossi's panic. The back door opened. Julian stepped out, a cigarette already between his lips. He saw her and paused. Didn't know you smoked. I don't. Then what are you doing out here? Thinking. She watched him light the cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face. What's your excuse? Same, he moved to the opposite wall, keeping distance between them. Not uncomfortable distance. Respectful distance. They stood in silence for a moment. The alley smelled like garbage and fryer oil, city smells that Ivy had stopped noticing years ago. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Traffic hummed on the main street beyond. You ever wonder why you do this? Julian asked suddenly. Do what? Work in restaurants. Deal with people like Mark. The long hours, the bad pay, the customers who treat you like furniture.
Ivy thought about it.
My mom worked in restaurants her whole life. She used to say it's honest work. You feed people, make them happy, go home tired but clean. No tricks, no games, she glanced at him.
What about you?
Why are you here? Julian took a long drag, exhaled slowly. I'm here because I need to be. That's cryptic. It's honest. Is it? Ivy pushed off the wall, moved a little closer. Because honest would be telling me what you're really doing at Rossi's. Honest would be explaining why a meat supplier looks at you like he's seen a ghost. Honest would be. You have family? Julian interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. Besides your mom? The question threw her.
No.
Just her. My dad left when I was 8. You? 3 brothers. No sisters. Something softened in his expression. They're younger. I've been taking care of them since our parents died. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He flicked ash from his cigarette. You're close with your mom?
Yeah.
She's sick though. Early onset Alzheimer's. Some days she knows me, some days she doesn't. Ivy felt her throat tighten. That's why I work so much. Medical bills, assisted living, medication. It adds up. Julian nodded slowly. That's why you put up with Mark. I need this job. Can't afford to make waves. You shouldn't have to choose between safety and survival. His voice carried an edge now, something sharp beneath the calm. No one should. Easy to say. Harder to live. I know. Julian dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. My youngest brother, Matteo, he's 17. Smart kid. Wants to be a lawyer, help people. But where we come from, being smart isn't always enough. Sometimes you need protection. Sometimes you need someone willing to get their hands dirty, so you don't have to. Is that what you do? Get your hands dirty. Julian looked at her then, really looked at her, and Ivy saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Sadness. Deep and old, and carried like a weight. I do what needs to be done, he said quietly. I'm not proud of everything I've done, but I'd do it all again if it meant my brothers got to be better than me. The honesty in his voice startled her. This was different from their other conversations, different from the careful distance he usually maintained. This felt real.
Raw.
What kind of music do you like? Ivy asked, changing the subject before it got too heavy. Julian blinked, surprised. Music?
Yeah.
I'm guessing not country. A smile flickered across his face. A real one this time.
Jazz.
The old stuff. Miles Davis, John Coltrane. My father used to play it on Sunday mornings. My mom loves Motown, Ivy said. Diana Ross, The Temptations. She still knows all the words even when she forgets my name. That's how music works. It lives somewhere deeper than memory. They talked for another 20 minutes. About bad customers and worse tips, about the best late-night diners in the city, about movies they'd seen and books they'd read. Julian knew literature, Real literature, not just bestsellers. He quoted Hemingway casually, mentioned Gabriel Garcia Marquez like an old friend. You didn't learn that washing dishes, Ivy observed. No, Julian agreed. I didn't. So, where did you learn it? Another life. He pulled out another cigarette, offered her one again. She surprised herself by taking it. He lit it for her, his hand cupping the flame against the wind. Their fingers almost touched. I don't know what you're doing here, Julian, Ivy said, exhaling smoke that made her cough slightly. But I'm glad you showed up when you did. That night with Mark. I don't know what would have happened. Nothing would have happened, Julian said firmly. Because I wouldn't have let it. You can't always be there. Can't I? Something in the way he said it made Ivy's pulse quicken. Not from fear. From something else entirely. The back door banged open. Tommy stuck his head out. Ivy, you got a call. Some guy asking for you. Who? Didn't say. Sounds official though. Ivy dropped her cigarette, crushed it out. I should go. Julian nodded. Be careful going home. It's 9:30. I know what time it is. Ivy walked back inside, but she felt Julian's eyes on her until the door closed. And for the first time since she'd started working at Rossi's kitchen, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Protected. The following week passed in a strange rhythm. Mark continued avoiding Julian, like a man dodging a curse. Mr. Rossi spent more time locked in his office, having hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when anyone walked by. And Julian kept watching, waiting, collecting pieces of a puzzle Ivy couldn't quite see. Friday night, closing shift. Ivy finished counting her tips, $63 for 8 hours of work, and stuffed them in her pocket. The restaurant was empty except for Sarah wiping down the bar and Carlos mopping the kitchen floor. You heading out? Sarah asked, grabbing her purse.
Yeah.
Long week.
Tell me about it.
You walking or catching the bus? Walking. It's only 12 blocks. Girl, it's almost 11. Want me to wait with you? I'm good. Go home to your kids. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Text me when you get home, okay? I will. Ivy locked the front door behind Sarah and Carlos, then headed toward the back exit. She pushed through the door into the alley, and the November cold bit at her exposed skin. She pulled her jacket tighter and started walking toward the street. That's when she saw it. A black Mercedes sedan, sleek and expensive, idling at the alley entrance. The windows were tinted, but the back door opened, and Julian stepped out. Not the Julian from the restaurant in his dish-stained apron and worn jeans. This Julian wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ivy's monthly rent. His hair was styled differently, swept back, making him look older. More dangerous. 2 men flanked him. Both in suits, both built like people who broke things professionally. One of them said something, and Julian nodded. Then the man opened a briefcase, showed Julian something inside. Julian examined the contents, papers, maybe money, then closed the briefcase and handed it back. He said something that made both men laugh. Not friendly laughter. Business laughter. Boss, we need to move, one of them said, loud enough for Ivy to hear. Carbone's expecting you at midnight.
Boss.
They'd called him boss. Ivy's breath caught in her throat. She pressed against the brick wall, hoping the shadows would hide her. But it was too late. Julian's head turned. His eyes found hers across 30 feet of alley. He froze, and Ivy watched his expression shift through several emotions in quick succession.
Surprise. Concern.
And something that looked almost like regret. Give me a minute, he told the men. Boss, we don't have. I said give me a minute. The tone left no room for argument. Both men stepped back toward the car. Julian walked toward Ivy slowly, each step deliberate. He stopped about 6 feet away, maintaining distance like he was afraid of spooking her. Ivy. Who are you? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. I'm still Julian. Dishwashers don't drive Mercedes. They don't have men calling them boss. They don't. She gestured at his suit, his shoes, the car with its engine purring like a satisfied cat. They don't have any of this. Julian ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the careful styling.
No.
They don't. So, what are you really doing here? At the restaurant. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Julian glanced back at the car, at the two men watching with barely concealed impatience. Then he looked at Ivy again, and she saw him making a decision. Not here, he said. Not like this. Then where? When? Tomorrow. After your shift, he pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. There's a diner on Maple Street. Rosie's. You know it. Yeah. Meet me there at 10. I'll explain everything. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know how this looks. I know what you must be thinking. But I need you to trust me until tomorrow. Why should I? Because I could have let Mark hurt you and I didn't. Because I could have ignored what's happening at that restaurant, and I'm not. His eyes held hers. Because despite everything you're thinking right now, you know I'm not the person you should be afraid of. Boss. One of the men called out. We're late. Julian didn't look away from Ivy. Tomorrow.
10 o'clock.
Please. He walked back to the car, and Ivy watched him slide into the back seat. The Mercedes pulled away smoothly, its red taillights disappearing around the corner like embers fading. Ivy stood in the alley for a long time, her mind racing. Everything she'd thought she knew about Julian had just shattered like dropped glass. The quiet dishwasher who fixed steamers and photographed invoices wasn't just observant or careful. He was something else entirely. She thought about the way Mark had looked at him, the terror in Tony the supplier's eyes, Mr. Rossi's panic, the authority Julian carried like a second skin.
Boss.
Ivy pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the search bar. She typed Julian and organized crime and Boston, then deleted it. She didn't want to know. Not yet. Not like this. But one thing was certain, Julian wasn't at Rossi's kitchen by accident. He was there for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it involved Mr. Rossi, the restaurant, and something bad enough to require men in expensive suits and midnight meetings. Ivy walked home quickly, checking over her shoulder every few blocks. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and leaned against it. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for not running. Tomorrow, you'll understand. Jay. Ivy stared at the message for a long time. She should have been scared. Should have been planning to quit, to run, to pretend she'd never seen that car or those men or Julian in that suit that changed everything. Instead, she texted back, I'll be there. Because despite everything, despite the fear and the confusion and the obvious danger, part of her wanted to understand. Part of her had been drawn to Julian from the moment he'd stepped between her and Mark. Not because he'd saved her, but because he'd seen her as someone worth saving. And that, more than anything, made her willing to hear the truth. Ivy didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Julian in that suit, saw those men calling him boss, saw the Mercedes disappearing into the darkness. By morning, she'd convinced herself a dozen times not to go to the diner. By afternoon, she knew she would anyway. Saturday's shift started at 4. Ivy arrived early, hoping to avoid everyone, but Mark was already there, standing by the time clock, waiting. Ivy, his voice was tight. Need to talk to you. I'm not scheduled until 4. This won't take long. He gestured toward his office.
Please.
Something in his tone set off alarm bells. Mark hadn't said please to her once in 6 months. But curiosity overrode caution. She followed him into the cramped office and immediately regretted it when he closed the door. What's going on? She asked, staying close to the exit. Mark leaned against his desk, arms crossed. He looked different today, not scared exactly, but determined. Like he'd made a decision and was committed to seeing it through. I know you've been talking to Julian, he said. So, I'm telling you to stay away from him. Ivy felt anger spike in her chest. You don't get to tell me who I talked to. I'm trying to protect you. Like you were protecting me last week? In the kitchen? Mark's jaw clenched. That was a mistake. I know that. But this is different. Julian isn't who you think he is. And who do you think he is? Dangerous. Mark moved closer, lowering his voice. I did some digging. Made some calls. Julian Santoro. Ever heard that name? Ivy's stomach dropped. Santoro. She'd heard that name before, whispered in conversations about the North End, about family businesses that weren't really about family. You're lying. I wish I was. Mark pulled out his phone, showed her a news article from 3 years ago. The headline read, Santoro family consolidates power after rival gang warfare. The photo showed a younger Julian in a dark suit, walking out of a courthouse, surrounded by lawyers. Ivy's hands went cold. He's Mob Ivy. Real deal organized crime. And he's here because of Mr. Rossi. Because this restaurant is involved in something bad, and Julian's family wants a piece of it. Mark pocketed his phone. Stay away from him. For your own safety. If you're so concerned about my safety, why didn't you stay away from me? That's different. Get out of my way, Mark. Ivy, listen. She pushed past him, her heart hammering. The article's image burned in her mind. Julian in that courthouse, his expression cold and unreadable. Julian Santoro. Not just Julian. Not just a dishwasher playing pretend. Someone with a last name that carried weight. And blood. The shift passed in a blur. Ivy moved through her tables mechanically, smiling at customers, taking orders, delivering food. Julian worked the dish station like always, but she couldn't look at him now without seeing that courthouse photo. At 9:30, she clocked out and headed for the back exit. She decided not to go to the diner. Whatever Julian wanted to tell her, she didn't want to hear it. She just wanted to forget all of this and find a new job and... Arms grabbed her from behind. Ivy screamed, but a hand clamped over her mouth. She was pulled backward into the alley, away from the light. 2 men, not the ones from last night, different ones, held her against the wall. Quiet, one of them hissed. He smelled like whiskey and violence. We just want to talk. Let her go. Julian's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. He stood at the alley entrance, perfectly still, his hands loose at his sides. Behind him, 2 other men materialized from the shadows. The ones from last night. The ones who'd called him boss. The man holding Ivy laughed. Well, the prince himself. Your territory's getting bold, Santoro. This isn't about territory. Let her go.
Now.
Or what? You'll start a war over some waitress? I'll end you before it becomes a war. Something in Julian's voice made the threat real. The man's grip on Ivy loosened slightly. His partner shifted nervously. Mark Patterson says hello, the man said. Says you've been disrespecting him. Thought we'd return the favor. Mark made a deal with you? Julian's voice dropped even lower. That was stupid. He offered us access to Rossi's supply chain. Said we could use it for distribution, if we helped him resolve his problem. And his problem is me. He seems to think so. Julian moved forward slowly. His men flanked him, not aggressive but ready. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to release her. You're going to walk away. And you're going to tell Mark that if he comes near her again, if he hires anyone else to come near her, I'll make him disappear so completely his ex-wives won't even remember his name. Big threats from. Not threats. Promises. Julian was close now, close enough that Ivy could see his eyes. They were absolutely dead.
No emotion. No hesitation.
Just certainty. And you're going to tell your boss that Rossi's kitchen is off limits. This restaurant, this staff, this entire block, it's mine now. Anyone who touches what's mine answers to me. Understood? The man holding Ivy released her suddenly. This isn't over. Yes, Julian said quietly. It is. The 2 men backed away, hands raised, trying to maintain dignity in retreat. They disappeared around the corner, footsteps echoing. Julian turned to Ivy. His expression shifted from that dead calm to something almost human, almost afraid. Are you hurt? Ivy shook her head. Her whole body was trembling. Did they? I'm fine, her voice cracked.
Ivy fine.
Julian reached for her, then stopped himself. I'm taking you somewhere safe. The diner? My apartment. It's secure. We'll talk there. Julian, I don't. Please, Ivy, and there it was again. That vulnerability beneath the armor. Please let me explain. Let me keep you safe. Ivy looked at this man. This stranger who wasn't a stranger. This criminal who'd saved her twice now. This boss who said please like he meant it and nodded. Okay. Julian's apartment was in the North End, 15 minutes from the restaurant. Not the penthouse Ivy expected, but a modest third-floor walk-up above a bakery. His men, Marco and Vincent, she learned, stayed in the car downstairs. Security, Julian called it. Protection, Ivy thought, though she wasn't sure if it was for her or from her. You hungry? Julian asked, unlocking the door. Not really. We're going to the diner anyway. You'll feel better with people around. Witnesses, he said it matter-of-factly, like he understood she might still be afraid of him. The diner was exactly what Ivy expected. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, a jukebox in the corner playing Patsy Cline. A handful of late-night customers scattered throughout. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, greeted Julian by name. The usual, honey? 2 coffees. And whatever she wants, Julian gestured to Ivy. Just coffee is fine, Ivy said. They slid into a corner booth, far from the other customers. Julian sat facing the door, habit, Ivy realized. Always watching the exits. Brought their coffee and left without small talk, reading the room perfectly. Ivy wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Julian Santoro. Yes. Mark showed me an article. About your family. Of course he did. Julian added sugar to his coffee, stirred slowly. What did it say? That 3 years ago, your family consolidated power after a gang war. That 6 people died. That you walked out of a courtroom free because witnesses recanted their testimony. All true. The casual admission stole her breath. You killed people. I didn't personally pull any triggers in that particular conflict. But I gave orders that resulted in deaths. Yes, he met her eyes. I'm not going to lie to you, Ivy. You deserve the truth. Why are you at Rossi's? Julian leaned back, the vinyl creaking under him. Because Anthony Rossi is laundering money for the Vitali family. Has been for 3 years. They use his restaurant to clean drug money, fake invoices, inflated supply costs, phantom employees on the payroll. In return, Rossi gets protection and a cut. Ivy thought about those invoices Julian had photographed. The closed-door meetings. Mr. Rossi's panic. And you want in?
No.
I want it stopped. Julian's voice hardened. The Vitales are animals. They push heroin in school zones. They traffic women. They hurt anyone who gets in their way, and they do it without conscience. My family, we have rules. Lines we don't cross. The Vitales have no lines. So you're the good guys. We're not good guys, Ivy. We're just less bad. He took a sip of coffee. My father built our business on gambling and protection. We took money from people who could afford to lose it. We protected neighborhoods that the cops ignored. We didn't touch drugs, didn't hurt civilians, didn't prey on the weak. When he died, I inherited that code. And I intend to keep it. By taking over Rossi's? By exposing what Rossi's doing and driving the Vitales out of our territory. The restaurant's finances are a mess. Easy to prove money laundering if you know what to look for. I've been gathering evidence for 6 weeks. Invoices, bank records, supplier testimony. Enough to bring in the feds. Then why work as a dishwasher? Why not just turn him in? Julian smiled faintly. Because I needed to understand the operation first. See who's involved, how deep it goes, who's complicit, and who's just trying to survive. People like you, like Sarah, like Carlos, you're not part of this. You're just caught in it. I needed to know who to protect before I burned it down. And Mark. Mark's not part of the laundering, but he's a predator. Uses his position to intimidate staff, particularly women. Mr. Rossi knows and doesn't care because Mark's good at keeping the restaurant running. Julian's jaw tightened. When I saw him corner you that night, I understood what kind of man he was. Stopping him wasn't strategy. It was necessity. Ivy processed this, her mind spinning. So, everything, becoming a dishwasher, Fixing the steamer, all of it. It was an investigation? Yes. And saving me? Was that part of the plan too? No, Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping. That was personal. I would have protected anyone on that staff from Mark. But you, he stopped, choosing his words carefully. You were different. You worked harder than anyone, treated everyone with respect, never complained even though I could see you were exhausted. You reminded me why I do this. Why the rules matter. Because people like you deserve to work without fear. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything. I just need you to understand. I'm not at Rossi's to hurt anyone. I'm there to make things right. To give you and everyone else a safe place to work. A fair wage. Management that doesn't look the other way when employees are harassed. By taking over the restaurant. By acquiring it legally after Rossi's arrested. My family owns several legitimate businesses, bakeries, construction companies, restaurants. Real businesses with real employees and fair practices. Rossi's will become one of them. And Mark. Mark crossed a line tonight. He hired Vitali soldiers to intimidate you, to get to me. That makes him complicit in organized crime. He'll be arrested alongside Rossi when the feds move in. Ivy felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. When?
Soon.
Maybe a week, maybe 2. I'm waiting for the right moment. Julian reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Until then, you're in danger. Mark knows you've seen me outside the restaurant. The Vitalis know I care about keeping you safe. That makes you leverage. So what do? You let me protect you. Marco and Vincent will watch your apartment, make sure no one bothers you. At work, you stay close to me or my people. And when this is over, he finally touched her hand, just his fingertips against hers. When this is over, you decide if you want to keep knowing Julian Santoro, or if you'd rather I disappear from your life completely. Why would I get to decide that? Because you deserve the choice. Because I've seen enough people trapped in situations they didn't choose. You won't be one of them. Ivy looked at their hands, barely touching across the scarred Formica table. I'm not afraid of you, she said quietly. Maybe you should be. But I'm not, she met his eyes. I'm angry that you lied about who you were. I'm confused about all of this. But I'm not afraid. Because you've had chances to hurt me, and instead you've kept me safe. Something shifted in Julian's expression. The armor cracked, just slightly, and underneath she saw exhaustion and loneliness, and something that looked like hope. Thank you, he said. For what? For not running. Sunday morning, Mark Patterson sat in his apartment with a bottle of whiskey and a loaded gun. The whiskey was almost empty. The gun he'd bought 2 days ago from a pawn shop, no questions asked. Neither was helping with the fear that had wrapped around his throat like a noose. Julian Santoro wasn't just dangerous. He was methodical, patient, the kind of man who didn't make threats he couldn't keep. And last night, after the Vitali soldiers he'd hired came back empty-handed and furious, Mark realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He'd thought hiring outside muscle would scare Julian off. Instead, he'd started a war he couldn't win. His phone buzzed. Another blocked number. He let it go to voicemail, like he had with the previous 12 calls. They were probably from the Vitalis, demanding payment for a job they'd botched. Or worse, from Julian's people, calling to tell him his time was up. Mark poured another drink with shaking hands. He hadn't meant for things to go this far. The incident with Ivy, that was just supposed to be a drink, maybe a little persuasion. He'd done it before with other waitresses, and most of them eventually gave in. But Ivy was stubborn, and then Julian had appeared like some kind of ghost, and everything spiraled. At first, Mark thought he could wait it out. Julian was just a dishwasher with an attitude. But then Tony the supplier had recognized him. Then Mr. Rossi had started acting paranoid, shredding documents and making desperate phone calls. Then Mark did what he should have done weeks ago. He asked around. The name Santoro opened doors. Bad doors. Everyone knew the family. Old money, old blood, old rules. They controlled half the North End, had judges in their pocket, and bodies buried in places the cops would never find. And Julian was the eldest son, the enforcer, the one who'd personally ended the Calabrese family's reign 3 years ago. Mark was screwed. But maybe there was still a way out. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he'd found on a dark corner of the internet. A man answered on the third ring. Yeah, I need protection. Someone's threatening me.
Who?
Julian Santoro. Silence. Then a low whistle. That's a big problem, friend. Can you help or not? Depends. What's the job? Mark's throat went dry. This was the line. Once he crossed it, there was no going back. I need him. Distracted. Long enough for me to leave town. Distracted how? He's protecting someone. A waitress named Ivy Martinez. If something happened to her, not permanent, just enough to pull his focus, I could disappear? Another silence. You want us to grab a civilian to get to a made man?
I'll pay.
50,000 inch. Make it 100 and we'll consider it. I don't have 100,000. Then you don't have a solution, the man paused. But I'll tell you what. We've been looking for a way into Santoro territory. He's been a pain in our ass for months, screwing with our distribution routes. You give us information about his operation at Rossi's kitchen, locations, schedules, who's working for him, and we'll handle your problem. Free of charge. Mark's hands trembled. What happens to the girl? That depends on how smart Santoro is. He backs off. She goes home with a scare. He doesn't. Well, that's on him. I don't want her hurt. I just need leverage. Sure, buddy. Whatever helps you sleep. The man's tone turned cold. You in or out? Because if you're wasting my time, I'm in. The words came out before Mark could stop them. I'll send you everything I know. Good. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Mark sat in the darkness of his apartment, the gun still on the table, and realized what he'd just done. He'd just signed a deal with the Calabrese remnants, the crew that Julian had destroyed 3 years ago. The ones who'd been waiting for revenge. They wouldn't just scare Ivy. They'd use her to hurt Julian in ways that would make death look merciful. Mark reached for the whiskey bottle, but his hand knocked it over. Amber liquid spread across the table, dripping onto the floor like blood. He thought about calling it off. Thought about warning someone. But who? The cops? They'd laugh him out of the station. Julian? That was suicide. Ivy? She wouldn't believe him, and even if she did, it was too late. The information was already sent. Photos of Ivy's schedule, her address, her route home from work. Details about Julian's movements, his men, his patterns. Everything Mark had observed over the past 2 weeks. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. We have what we need. Stay out of sight for 48 hours. When it's done, leave town and never come back. If you talk to anyone, you're dead. Mark deleted the message with shaking fingers. He'd told himself he was just trying to survive. That Julian had forced his hand. That Ivy was collateral damage in a war he didn't start. But deep down in the part of himself he avoided looking at, Mark knew the truth. He was a coward who'd put an innocent woman in danger because he couldn't accept rejection. Because he'd rather hurt someone else than face consequences for his own actions. The guilt settled over him like a weight. But not heavy enough to make him pick up the phone and warn anyone. Instead, Mark packed a bag, grabbed the gun, and left his apartment. He'd hole up in a motel outside the city, wait for news, and pray that when this was over, he'd still be alive. He didn't pray for Ivy. He couldn't afford to think about what he'd just unleashed. Monday morning would come, and with it, the kind of violence that turned waitresses into leverage and protection into a liability. Mark told himself it wasn't his fault. He almost believed it. Monday evening, Ivy finished her shift at 8. Julian had insisted Marco walk her to her car, but she'd refused. I can't live like this, she told him. I can't have bodyguards following me forever. Just until things settle, Julian had said, but she'd seen the concern in his eyes. The way he'd been watching the restaurant all day, tense and alert, like he was waiting for something. Now, walking the 12 blocks to her apartment, Ivy wondered if she should have listened. The November wind cut through her jacket. The streets were busier than usual, people heading home from work, students from the community college, the normal rhythm of city life. Ivy kept her head down, hands in her pockets, trying to blend in. She turned onto Hanover Street, just 4 blocks from home. That's when she noticed the car. A dark sedan, following slowly about half a block behind. It could have been nothing, just someone looking for parking in the crowded neighborhood. But something about it made Ivy's pulse quicken. She turned left onto a side street. The car turned too. Ivy's heart hammered. She walked faster, pulling out her phone. She should call Julian. Should call 911. Should do something other than panic. The car accelerated. Ivy ran. She made it maybe 20 feet before 2 men jumped out, moving fast. One grabbed her from behind, his hand clamping over her mouth before she could scream. The other one opened the back door of the sedan. "Don't fight," the man hissed in her ear. "Make this easy and you don't get hurt." Ivy bit down hard on his hand. He swore, loosening his grip just enough for her to scream, one short, sharp sound before he covered her mouth again. But it was enough. Tires squealed. Another car, a black SUV, came around the corner so fast it almost went up on 2 wheels. It screeched to a stop, and Marco and Vincent jumped out, guns already drawn. "Let her go."
Marcos shouted.
The man holding Ivy froze. His partner reached for something under his jacket, a weapon, but Vincent was faster. "Don't move." For a moment, nobody breathed. Then headlights flooded the street. Julian's Mercedes appeared, blocking the sedan's escape route. Julian got out slowly, and even from a distance, Ivy could see the fury in his movements.
Controlled, but barely. Let
her go. Each word was a death sentence. The man holding Ivy calculated his options, and apparently didn't like any of them. He released her with a shove. Ivy stumbled forward, and Marco caught her, pulling her behind him. "Get in your car and drive away," Julian said, his voice deadly calm. "Right now. Before I change my mind about letting you live. Calabrese sends his regards," one of the men said, smiling. "Says this is just the beginning." Julian's expression didn't change. "Tell Calabrese he should have stayed in whatever hole he was hiding in. Because now I'm coming for him. You can't protect her forever, Santoro. We know where she lives, where she works, where her sick mother stays in that assisted living place on Camden Street." Ivy's blood turned to ice. They knew about her mother. Julian moved so fast Ivy barely saw it. 1 second he was standing by his car, the next he had the man by the throat, slammed against the sedan. "You go near her mother," Julian said quietly, "and I will make you beg for death. I will take you apart piece by piece and make sure you stay conscious for all of it. I will destroy everyone you've ever cared about and make you watch. Do you understand me?" The man's face turned purple. He nodded frantically. Julian released him, stepped back. "Get out of my city." Both men scrambled into their car. The sedan peeled away, tires smoking. Julian turned to Ivy, and the rage drained from his face, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her whole body was trembling. "They know about my mom." "I know." He moved closer, and for the first time since she'd met him, Julian looked shaken. Actually shaken.
"I'm sorry."
"I should have anticipated this. Should have moved faster." Calabrese. Ivy wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought you destroyed his family. I destroyed his leadership. But apparently some of them survived and regrouped. And Mark just gave them everything they needed to come after you. Mark did this. We found evidence. Emails, text messages. He reached out to them yesterday, gave them your information, told them when you'd be walking home." Julian's jaw tightened. "He traded your safety for his escape." Ivy felt sick. Mark had tried to have her kidnapped. The same man who'd cornered her in the kitchen, who'd claimed to be concerned about her safety, had sold her out to criminals. "Where is he now?" she asked.
"Gone.
Left town yesterday. But we'll find him. Julian gestured to the SUV. Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe. And we need to protect your mother. I need to see her. I need to make sure. Vincent's already on his way to Camden Street with 3 men. Your mother will be moved to a secure facility tonight. Private care, 24-hour protection. The best doctors, everything she needs. I can't afford. You're not paying for it. Julian's voice was firm. This is my fault. I brought this into your life. I'll handle it. Ivy wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. What happens now? Now. Julian opened the Mercedes door. Now I end this. For good. Marco approached, keeping his voice low. Boss, we need to move. Calabrese's crew might come back with reinforcements. Julian nodded. Take Ivy to the safe house. Full security detail. No one gets in or out without my authorization. What about you? Ivy asked. I have work to do. She grabbed his arm. Julian, don't do anything stupid. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than words. I won't, he said quietly. I promise. But they both knew it was a lie. Julian was going to war and people were going to die. The only question was how many. The safe house was a brownstone in Beacon Hill, quiet and elegant. Nothing like what Ivy expected from a mob hideout. Hardwood floors, tasteful furniture, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. The only thing that gave it away were the security cameras and the 2 armed men stationed outside. Marco showed her to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. Bathrooms through there. Kitchen stocked. Don't open the curtains. Don't answer the door. Someone will be right outside if you need anything. How long do I have to stay here? Until Julian says otherwise. Marco's expression softened.
He's worried about you.
I've known him 10 years. Never seen him like this over anyone. After Marco left, Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. She should have been terrified. She'd almost been kidnapped. Her mother was being moved by armed guards, and she was hiding in a safe house owned by the mob. But all she could think about was the look on Julian's face when he'd asked if she was hurt. The barely controlled fury when those men mentioned her mother. The promise he'd made, knowing he might not be able to keep it. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Her heart jumped, but then she heard Marco's voice outside the door. Boss, you should get some sleep.
Ivy fine.
You haven't slept in 36 hours. I said I'm fine. The door opened. Julian stood in the doorway, still in the clothes from earlier, but they looked different now, rumpled, stained with something dark on the sleeve. His knuckles were bruised and split. You're awake, he said. What happened to your hands? Nothing important. He stepped inside, closed the door. Your mother's safe. I just came from the facility. She's settled in, sleeping. The staff there is excellent. Did you hurt someone? Julian didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window, careful not to disturb the curtains, and stood there with his back to her. I did what needed to be done. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. He turned around, and Ivy saw the exhaustion in his face. The weight of whatever he'd done tonight. The Calabrese crew won't bother you again. Neither will Mark. You're safe now. And you? Are you safe? I'm always safe. That's not true. Ivy stood up, moved closer to him. You can lie to everyone else, Julian, but don't lie to me. Not anymore. Something cracked in his expression. He sank into the chair by the window, head in his hands.
I'm tired, Ivy.
So tired of this life. Of making decisions that destroy people. Of pretending that violence is just business, that it doesn't leave marks. Ivy knelt in front of him. Then why do you do it? Because my brothers need me to. Because our family built something, and walking away would let it crumble. Because he looked at her, and she saw tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. Because I don't know how to be anything else. I don't believe that. You should, he gestured at his bruised knuckles. Look at me. This is who I am. This is what I do. I hurt people for a living, Ivy. I make them afraid, so they'll fall in line. Tonight, I put 2 men in the hospital and threatened to kill a third if he didn't tell me where Mark was hiding. That's not a man you should want to know. But I do want to know you. The words came out before she could stop them. I've seen you at the restaurant, the way you treat the staff with respect, the way you fixed that steamer without being asked, the way you protected me when you didn't have to. That's who you are too. That's who I want to be. It's not the same thing. Then make it the same thing. Ivy reached for his damaged hands, held them gently. You said your brothers want to be better than you. But maybe you're already better than you think. Maybe you just need to choose it. Julian looked at their joined hands. I've done terrible things, Ivy. Things I can't take back. Things that would make you run if you knew the details. Tell me one. The worst one. Let me decide. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. When I was 23, a rival family kidnapped my youngest brother. Mateo was 14. They sent us photos of what they'd done to him. Broken bones, cigarette burns, things that still give him nightmares. My father wanted to negotiate. I didn't. I took 5 men, found where they were holding him, and he stopped, swallowed hard. I made sure they understood what happens when you hurt my family. 3 of them died. The other 2 wished they had. Did you get Mateo back? Yes. And those men, would they have killed him? Eventually, yes. Then you saved your brother's life. Ivy squeezed his hands. That doesn't make you a monster, Julian. That makes you someone who protects the people he loves. At what cost? How many people do I have to hurt before I become the thing I'm trying to stop? I don't know. But I know you ask yourself that question, and that matters. Men like Mark, like those Calabrese soldiers, they don't question. They just take what they want. You're different. Julian pulled his hands away gently, stood up. He walked to the window again, his silhouette dark against the curtains. After tonight, after everything that's happened, you should hate me. You should be planning how to get away from me the first chance you get. Is that what you want? No, the word came out rough, honest. God help me, no. I want you to stay. I want to wake up tomorrow and see you in my kitchen making coffee. I want to take you to dinner somewhere nice where we can just be 2 normal people. He turned around, and the vulnerability in his face broke her heart. I want to be the kind of man who deserves you. But I don't know if that's possible. Ivy stood, crossed the room until she was directly in front of him. Then let's find out. Together. Ivy, I'm not saying I'm not scared. I am. But I'm also not running. Because when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see someone who's been fighting his whole life to protect people who can't protect themselves. Someone who works as a dishwasher to expose corruption instead of just walking in with guns. Someone who asks permission before protecting me instead of just deciding he knows what's best. You barely know me. Then let me know you. The real you. Not the boss, not the enforcer.
Julian.
Just Julian. He reached up, touched her face with those bruised, gentle hands. You could have any life you wanted. Why would you choose one that involves looking over your shoulder? Because the only time I felt truly safe in the last 6 months was when you were around. Because you see me as a person, not just a waitress or a victim. Because she leaned into his touch. Because I think you need someone to choose you, not the life you offer. Just you. Julian closed his eyes, and a tear tracked down his cheek. When he opened them again, they held something Ivy hadn't seen before.
Hope.
I don't deserve this, he whispered. Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt him shake with silent tears. They stood there in the dim room, holding each other like survivors of a shipwreck, and for the first time since everything started, Ivy felt something shift. This wasn't victim and protector anymore. This was something real. Something worth fighting for. 2 weeks later, federal agents raided Rossi's kitchen at 6 a.m. Ivy watched from across the street with Julian, sipping coffee as unmarked cars surrounded the restaurant. Mr. Rossi was let out in handcuffs, his face gray and defeated. 3 of his suppliers followed, along with 2 men Ivy recognized as Vitali associates who sometimes hung around the kitchen. Is it over? She asked. Almost, Julian's arm was around her shoulders, casual but protective. The feds will trace the money, make their case. Rossi will cooperate to reduce his sentence. The Vitalis will lose their distribution network in the North End. And the restaurant goes into receivership, which is where we come in. Julian had explained the plan over the past 2 weeks, during the hours they'd spent together at the safe house. His family would acquire Rossi's kitchen through a shell company, legal, clean, documented. The employees would keep their jobs with better pay and actual benefits. The menu would improve. The harassment would end. What about Mark? Ivy hadn't been able to stop thinking about him, about what he'd done. Mark Patterson was arrested 3 days ago trying to cross into Canada. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, among other charges. He's looking at 10 to 15 years. Julian's voice held no satisfaction, just finality. He made his choices. Sarah appeared beside them, holding her own coffee. She'd been one of the first employees Julian contacted about staying on after the transition. Is it weird that I'm sad? She asked. I mean, Mr. Rossi was laundering money and Mark was awful, but it's still the end of something, you know? It's the end of one thing, Ivy said. Beginning of something better. I hope so, Sarah looked at Julian. You're really going to keep all of us on? Everyone who wants to stay. Same positions, higher wages, health insurance, paid sick leave. And a new manager who understands that employees are people, not property. Who's the new manager? Julian smiled slightly. We're still interviewing candidates. That was a lie. Julian had already offered the position to someone, he just hadn't told Ivy who yet. The federal agents finished clearing the building. One of them, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, crossed the street toward Julian. Mr. Santoro. Agent Chen. Julian shook her hand. Everything in order. Your family's cooperation was noted. The files you provided were instrumental, she glanced at Ivy. Ms. Martinez, I understand you've had a difficult few weeks. I'm sorry you were caught up in this. I'm okay, Ivy said, though okay felt like an understatement. She'd spent the past 2 weeks in Julian's world, meeting his brothers, learning about his businesses, understanding the careful line he walked between legitimate enterprise and family legacy. Agent Chen handed Julian a folder. The paperwork for the acquisition. Once the judge signs off, ownership transfers to Santoro Holdings. Should be finalized by Monday. Thank you. After Agent Chen left, Sarah turned to Ivy. So, you're really dating a guy who just bought our restaurant by getting the owner arrested? When you put it like that, it sounds weird. It is weird, but also kind of romantic, in a very illegal way. It's not illegal, Julian said mildly. Everything we did was by the book. We just knew which book to read. Sarah laughed. I'm going to pretend I understand what that means. See you guys later. After she left, Ivy turned to Julian. So what happens now? Now we rebuild. New equipment, better suppliers, actual training for the staff. And we make Rossi's kitchen into what it should have been all along. A good place to work. And the position you're interviewing for. Julian pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I wanted to wait for the right moment. Ivy opened it. Inside was an official job offer, assistant manager, Rossi's kitchen, with a salary that made her eyes widen. Benefits. Profit sharing. A signing bonus that would cover her mother's care for 6 months. Julian, this is what you're worth. What you've always been worth, he turned her to face him. You know that place better than anyone. You know the staff, the customers, the flow of service. You've been doing management work for server pay. This just makes it official. But people will think I only got it because of you. Let them think what they want. You earned this, Ivy. I'm just the one finally paying attention. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. But if you don't want it, if you want something else entirely, tell me. This is your choice. Ivy looked at the restaurant. Her restaurant, in a way, after 6 months of serving tables and dealing with Mark's harassment and Mr. Rossi's neglect. She thought about Sarah and Carlos and Tommy, about the possibility of making it better for all of them. I want it, she said. I want to help rebuild it. Then it's yours. That evening, Julian called a meeting with the remaining staff. 23 people crowded into the dining room, servers, cooks, dishwashers, hosts. All of them uncertain, worried about their jobs. Julian stood at the front, and Ivy watched him shift into the role he was born for. Confident but not arrogant. Clear but not cold. "I know you have questions," he began. "About what happens next, about your jobs, about whether you can trust me. So I'll be direct. Rossi's Kitchen has new ownership as of today. My family's company, Santoro Holdings. We own 4 other restaurants in Boston, all legitimate businesses with good reputations." Tommy raised his hand. "What happens to us?" "You keep your jobs if you want them. Same positions, better pay, actual benefits. We're investing in new equipment, better ingredients, professional training. This place is going to become what it should have been, somewhere you're proud to work. And if we don't want to stay,"
Carlos asked,
"then you leave with good references and 2 months severance. No hard feelings. This is your choice." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah spoke up. "Who's managing?" "Ivy Martinez will be assistant manager, reporting to a general manager we're hiring from outside. Someone with experience, but no history with the old operation. Fresh start." All eyes turned to Ivy. She stood up, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I know this is strange. I know some of you might think I don't deserve this position. But I've worked here as long as most of you. I know this place. And I promise I'm going to work every day to make it better for all of us." Tommy started clapping. Then Sarah joined in. Then Carlos. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. Ivy felt tears sting her eyes. After the meeting, people lingered, asking questions, making plans. The energy had shifted from fear to something like hope. Julian found Ivy by the kitchen window, watching the street outside. "You did good in there." "I was terrified. Couldn't tell." He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This is what I wanted. What I've been working toward. Not just taking down the Vitalis or exposing Rossi, but giving people like you a chance to build something good." "Is that why you really came here? To help people?" "No," Julian admitted. "I came here for business. For territory and power, and all the things my family deals in. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than that. About you. About making sure you didn't have to choose between safety and survival. You changed my life, Julian. You changed mine first." They stood together as the sun set over the city, watching their restaurant, their future, and for the first time in a long time, both of them felt something rare in their world.
Peace.
6 months later. Ivy locked the front door of Rossi's Kitchen. No, she had to stop calling it that. The sign outside now read the North End Table, and the restaurant barely resembled the place where Mark had cornered her in a hallway. New floors, new paint, new menu. But more than that, new energy. The staff smiled now.
Laughed.
Came to work without that haunted look that comes from being chronically undervalued and afraid. Sarah had been promoted to head server.
Carlos was sous-chef.
Tommy ran the line like a maestro. And Ivy managed it all with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She finished her final walkthrough, checking that everything was secure. The evening had been busy. Friday nights always were now. They'd gotten a great review in the Globe last month, and reservations were booked 3 weeks out. Success tasted different than she'd expected. Sweeter, but also weighted with responsibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's care facility. "Your mom had a good day. Asked for you by name. See you tomorrow." Ivy smiled. The good days were becoming more frequent. The new facility, the better medication, the specialized care, it was working. Her mother still had Alzheimer's, still had bad days when she didn't recognize anyone. But the good days felt like gifts now. She grabbed her coat and headed out the back exit. The November air was cold, but not unpleasant. A year ago, almost to the day, she'd been cornered in a hallway by a man who thought power meant taking what you wanted. Now that man was in prison, and she was closing up her own restaurant. Funny how life worked. "You're late." Ivy jumped, then laughed when she saw Julian leaning against the brick wall. Same spot where they'd shared their first real conversation. Same leather jacket, same dark eyes, but something was different now.
Softer.
More open. I had paperwork, she said. Managers do that, you know. I've heard rumors. He pushed off the wall, moved toward her with that effortless grace that still made her heart skip. How is tonight? Good. Great, actually. We did 300 covers and only 2 minor disasters. That's my girl. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become familiar over the past 6 months. You ready? For what? You'll see. They walked together through the North End streets. The neighborhood had changed for Ivy. It wasn't just where she worked anymore. It was where she lived, in the apartment above Julian's, where his brothers came for Sunday dinners and his associates treated her with the same respect they showed him. She'd learned to navigate his world carefully, to know which questions not to ask, which conversations to leave the room for, which phone calls meant he'd be gone for days, without explanation. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And on the good days, the days when he came home early and cooked pasta from his grandmother's recipe, when he talked about his brothers with pride instead of worry, when he looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to something good, those days made everything else worth it. They turned onto a side street, and Ivy recognized where they were going. The diner. Rosie's, where Julian had first told her the truth about who he was and what he wanted. We're having a late dinner? She asked. Something like that. Inside, the diner was empty except for who smiled when she saw them. Your usual spots waiting, honey. They slid into the same booth from that night 6 months ago. Same scarred Formica table, same vinyl seats patched with duct tape. But everything else was different. Brought coffee without being asked and left them alone. So, Ivy said, adding sugar to her cup. What's this about? Julian reached across the table, took her hand. His knuckles had healed months ago, but she could still see the faint scars. Reminders of the night he'd almost lost her. I've been thinking, he started then stopped. Julian never hesitated, never searched for words. But now he looked almost nervous. About what you said that night, in the safe house, about choosing me, not the life I offer. I remember. I didn't believe you then. Didn't think it was possible for someone to look at all of this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing his world, and choose to stay. But I did stay. You did. You stayed through federal investigations and threats from rival families and my brothers interrogating you at Sunday dinner. You stayed when I had to leave for 3 days to handle business in New York. You stayed when you could have taken that manager job at the seaport and never looked back. Where's this going, Julian? He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small velvet box that made Ivy's breath catch. I'm not proposing, he said quickly. Not yet. Not until you're ready, if you're ever ready. But I wanted you to have this. He opened the box. Inside was a key, old brass, worn smooth from use. It was my mother's, Julian said quietly. The key to her house, the one my father bought her when they got married. It's been in my family for 40 years. And I want you to have it. Julian, I can't. The house is mine now. I've been renovating it. 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a garden out back. It's in a quiet neighborhood, away from everything. Somewhere safe. Somewhere we could. He stopped, swallowed. Somewhere we could build something that's just ours. Not the restaurant, not the business. Just us. Ivy stared at the key, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Not marriage, not yet, but commitment. A future. A choice to build something together that existed outside his world and inside it at the same time. There's a room for your mother, he continued. If she gets worse, if the facility isn't enough, there's space for her. For us. For whatever we need. Ivy looked up at him. At this man who'd saved her from harassment and introduced her to danger and somehow given her a life she'd never imagined wanting. Okay, she said. Okay, I want the key. I want the house. I want, her voice caught. I want Sunday dinners and renovations and arguments about paint colors. I want all of it. Julian smiled, really smiled, and the joy in his face was worth every difficult moment that had led them here. There's one condition, Ivy added. Name it. We plant tomatoes in the garden. My mom used to grow them before she got sick. I want that back. Done. He slid the key across the table. Ivy picked it up, felt its weight, its history. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, tired, scared, cornered in a hallway with no way out. And the woman she was now, stronger, braver, standing beside someone who'd seen her not as something to possess, but someone worth protecting. I love you, she said, the words surprising them both. Julian's eyes widened, then softened. I love you too. Have for months. Was just waiting for the right moment to say it. This is the right moment. They finished their coffee, paid, and walked out into the November night. The city hummed around them, car horns, distant sirens, the sounds of lives being lived. Good and bad, light and dark, all tangled together like yarn. Julian took Ivy's hand, and they walked toward home. Not the apartment above his, but the house with the garden where they'd plant tomatoes come spring. The house that represented a choice they were both making, to face whatever came next together. The world was still dangerous. Julian's business still existed in shadows. There would be more late-night phone calls, more careful questions, more moments when Ivy would have to choose between comfort and truth. But as they walked through the North End streets, past the restaurant where everything had started, Ivy realized something important. She wasn't being protected anymore. She was choosing to protect something too, this fragile, unlikely thing they'd built together. This love that had started in a kitchen hallway and grown into something worth fighting for. Julian squeezed her hand. You ready? Ivy squeezed back. For what? Everything. She looked at him. This man who taught her that power could be gentle, that danger could keep you safe, that the darkest places sometimes held the most light.
Yeah, she said.
I'm ready. And hand in hand, equal partners in an unequal world, they walked home together. Not as victim and protector. Not as waitress and boss. Just as Ivy and Julian. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided that together, they'd make their own light. The end.